introduced, I was trying to remember, and I think that we were introduced about over a year ago by Greg Enriquez, and because we're on this his line of conversations together, and I noticed that your name keeps popping up in some spaces that I am. And then recently, when I created Fine Line Full Circle, that really focuses on talking about the masculine and the feminine, and the dance really focuses on why aren't we dancing this dance more beautifully, and how can we dance this dance more beautifully? So anything, it might be just, narrowing in what it means to be the feminine, or narrowing on the masculine, and then some conversations might bring the dance. And I know that you work with all of that. You work, from what I know, and I'd love you to add more. From what I know, you work with leadership, but with feminine leadership. And I know that you also were successful in the corporate, which is a very different background to my background. So I'm interested in that as well. And then it kind of seems to me that you kind of mastered the art of speaking masculine in some time of your life. And then for the past, I don't know how long, you started really exploring the feminine. And now I see you doing exactly that, the play, and coming to spaces that are more masculine and bringing that. And sometimes you also spend a lot of time with women. So I'm curious about your whole journey, and I'm really interested in just dialoguing with you. So I'm happy to have you here.
I'm really happy to be here.
So what feels natural for you to, does it feel natural for you to share a little bit of your journey? I think it would be great for some people. You shared with me before, but I'd love others to know a little bit of your trajectory from the leadership and into the work that you do now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's interesting. It feels nice to check in with that. I'm gonna have my period in 1 or 2 days or something, and it's quite interesting because I usually the past year I've been quite good at kind of following my cycle and kind of booking in more public facing things, depending on different parts of my cycle, and I haven't really done that the past 2 or 3 cycles. Yeah, it feels interesting that or it feels like a nice invitation to also be on a podcast on this part of my cycle. But I also noticed that I don't feel very wordy and conceptual in my mind. I feel a bit yeah, but I like the first I was feeling a bit resistance towards that, but then I'm but I'm having this conversation with Adriana, it feels actually perfect to be able to kind of show myself and be in kind of all phases. But it feels nice to kind of start with that.
I just want to say that I'm very grateful that you brought it in, because you were modeling something that I feel I just feel excited about, that you're modeling how it feels for you to be here today in this part of your cycle and speaking about it. So it's thanks for sharing.
So I mean, of course there's a million ways you can tell your journey, but I'll just start speaking to what is alive in me right now around that. I think for me, I've I think the beginning, I've always had such a deep longing for life, ever since I was young, to just really live life fully. And I'm really, really high sensitive, and I think it's this I don't know, like conflict of like feeling so much all the time and being overwhelmed a lot as young. And like, I don't know, this fear of like missing out because I was so overwhelmed, but also because I was feeling so much, like seeing how much there is to experience and feel in the world. So this kind of, yeah, I think this kind of created like a drive in me um, to be able to, yeah, to create context and spaces, I guess firstly for myself to be able to be in the world and really take in and feel all the things that I'm feeling, like to yeah. And maybe, you know, first it was, you know, like to just not be overwhelmed, but but uh, but now it's more about really like, okay, like how can we lean into this experience together, like how can we really be here, how can we really show up, and like, because life is so like rich. And yeah, and I just always had this longing to like really feel, really be alive, like really feel life. And um yeah, and I think that's really what brought me into kind of like leadership and organization and business, um because there's also something, there's, and I guess maybe that's also the polarity, like I love this like this dense richness of life, but then also thinking of like the scale or the system, or like, and because I guess those two can often be in contradiction, that like when something scales or something becomes bigger, you kind of lose that connection. And I've always been fascinated, but like, but how can we and I guess again it comes from this of like not wanting to be alone in this experience of like feeling so much, but like being together with a lot of people, everybody like being their selves and feeling. um yeah, so I think that um that, you know, like at uni, that brought me to start like I founded several student organizations while I was studying, and really started to like experimenting with how to create ways of how to set the conditions, how to, you know, garden, how to facilitate like all the different things you can do for a group to have this feeling of like deep truth and aliveness and connection together. um, and so I studied engineering and management, um, and it was yeah, it was such a great, I was like living in a student city, and it was such a great playground with, you know, a lot of enthusiastic young people wanting to try crazy new ways of creating things together. So I really started experimenting with just following my intuition on like different ways of, you know, building organizations or creating things. And a couple years in, I realized that there was this whole like field called, you know, like self-organizing or complexity theory, complex adaptive systems. I mean, this was like before the whole, I don't know if you're into like the whole reinventing organizations, Lalu. Oh, um, and my first part of that was Art of Hosting, which is this global network that's been for like 20 years, that has kind of harvested different practices around bringing lots of people together, discussing complex topics without getting lost, basically, you can say. And like
quite feminine in some way. I mean, the networking, not quite networking, but just hold Art of Hosting. That's
yeah, 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 exactly, yeah, really. And yeah, so trying not to get too lost in my story, but basically I got really into, I was really like, you know, like mind blown by that whole I guess you could say paradigm, new thought school in like both, you know, personal development, leadership, organizational theory, um, but also which, you know, but also societal theory, like, you know, what kind of internet is doing, enabling us, is also, you know, very much in line with, we used to be able, it used to be just central companies sending out their messages to people, and then the internet allows this self-organized. Yeah, so I just really dove into that, both kind of theoretically, but mostly also practically, like did my master's thesis on Keegan and consciousness development, and got into that whole adult development theory really deeply. And then, for the first years of my career, worked as a consultant within like the businesses, trying to do this. There's a lot of names for it: decentralized, self-organized, teal, whatever you want to call it. But this kind of new approach to which I now realize is really, merging the linear and the circle, like doing those is, I think, one quite easy and fundamental way to describe this way of leading. But when I was doing this, like I had this intuitive sense that like we're not, like, I was never really like, I never got this feeling of like, like we're doing it, like and I was in the most progressive companies, and first in Sweden, but then also, in Europe, and also dabbed in like the political realm of decentralized politics. And I was also really like burning myself out, like really, and there was a lot of just burnout in the field, in this progressive burnout and confusion. And it just felt like it was taking too much energy from people and resources to be able to sustain it in a scalable way. And I don't really think I thought about it that clearly then, but there's just this like, this is not really working for the individuals in this, or at least not scalable and over a long time. And then, I think 6 years ago, my then like friend and mentor, asked me if I wanted to take her course that was then called Divine Eros and Pussy Power. Now it's called Awakening Feminine Leadership. For some reason I said yes. I really hadn't been thinking about feminine and masculine. I even had quite a lot of a bit conscious but mostly unconscious what's the word, like
resistance, maybe? No,
like, but deeper than resistance, more that like I didn't like aversion. I didn't like the feminine, and mainly a lot because of my high sensitivity, that like all the traits that I thought of as that I was a bit ashamed of in myself, I kind of connected to the feminine, of like, and I did get feedback, being like too sensitive and naive and all these different things that that I was really trying to prove that I'm not too sensitive, I'm not naive, I'm not all these things. Anyways, for some reason I said yes, and it was just really deeply like caught me in my body, this work. And I had a really deep awakening to myself, through my body. And already, like, I think already when I was taking the course, just like during the first weeks, I was like, I got this. Yeah, it was already when I was taking the course, because I think 2 weeks after I took the course, I initiated Nordic Women's Gathering, which is like crazy because I had, never thought about women's work, but I just was like, whoa, like, okay, like this, like this life force, this energy, like this was what I'm feeling in this feminine. This is exactly what we need to orient ourselves around. This is the fuel and the gravity and the attractional field, that this is like that, it's the fire in the center, that if we're gonna succeed with self-organizing, like if it's not there, of course it's gonna burn out, of course there's gonna be confusion, there's nothing guiding us. I don't.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just curious. So when you're taking this course and you suddenly, of course you're very intelligent by that point, like working with your mind quite a lot. So your mind was very activated. And then what I'm imagining, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the way the teaching came from a different place. and it touched you in a different place in yourself that maybe wasn't so it was of course very sensitive, as you said, but it wasn't so, you hadn't been working with it consciously. And when you said you had an awakening, can you share more? What was that for you? Like, what was the experience for you during that course, and the awakening, the before and the after?
Like in one way it's a bit difficult because now I've been so bathing in it for like 6 years that it's starting to get difficult to imagine how it was before. But I have a really great story to like, so a dear friend of mine, now dear friend of mine, we didn't know each other that well. Also, we were in the same student organization in university, but in different cities. But we met for a couple of weekends, so she kind of knew me before, so to speak. And then, some months after I had done this initiation course, we did a breakfast event for like 100 women at this co-working space that was like a castle. And before, as Åsa knew me, I had quite like androgynous style, just like how I was like carrying myself in the world, and like, yeah, I was really not sensual at all, just in a different way. And and this breakfast, I was like wearing this like flowery dress, and was just like, I just like found this like like this feminine power, and it was just, I was just so such a homecoming, and such a like, and she just came up to me afterwards and was like like what did she like, she was like speechless. I just like remember, because she's like, what happened to you? Like what's that? And like this movie when this woman like fakes an orgasm, and there's somebody else at the restaurant is like, what is she having? Like, I want that. Kind of that thing. And then also joined the course, and she's one of the pioneers as well now in this work. But yeah, I just think that that's like but I don't know, to put some words on it, it's like in a sense that the world like went from black and white to color, like I it was a deep homecoming. And I mean, like, then I didn't have this. I mean, I've been thinking about this for 6 years now, so all these like intellectual things about this is important for self-organized, like I didn't have any of that. Like, it was the first time, and all like the writing and stuff I do now, like it's come from my body. Like, it's the first time that like concepts are coming to me through my body, not through my mind. So first I didn't understand. I just felt like this is what like, this is what I need, this is what the world needs, but most of all, like, this is what I want. Like, this is what I want for myself, and what I deeply deeply want for all the women around me to also and it's also, please interrupt me. I feel like
No, I'm loving it. Carry on. But I'll interrupt you just so we can jam. But I'm loving hearing, because the more that I get a little bit more of your context, then I can feel. I even noticed, of course, the energetic transmission through your, when you're sharing. So I could feel you more, and it's good because then we can exchange more deeply. I love it. Yeah. So please carry on.
Yeah, but what I like want to say as well is that, like, so the work that Lovisa does in her path, it's very much about like about your connection. She calls the vagina the jewel. So it's like about your connection to the jewel. It's like, the initiation course is like really bathing in this like sensual feminine space to really just allow your body to sink into that together with other women, and like remember. And it is a lot about, your desires and your longing and your pleasure, and the power of female sexuality, like, and how important our sexuality is for us. And kind of with the masculine lens, you can think that only is about, like feeling turned on and sexual, and like, and it definitely is, but like the thing is like for the feminine, there's not a separation between, you know, like between life and death, or between you know, relaxation and turn on. Like it's so cyclical and so intertwined. So also like after I did this initiation, I had the 2 months following were like the darkest months of my life. And because I was able, because I had accessed this life force, this life, like this guide, this I was able to go to my darkness, like to go to the deep, really hurt, really, you know, scared part of myself in a way that I had never before. uh, and that like I was able to basically face death, and like face my fear of death, and face this fear, you know, of my overwhelm and missing out on life, and like um and also, you know, um, things in relationship with my mother, and you know, other like really deep things, and really meet myself there, and like let go and surrender into that. And then like I just like bloomed out of that soil, and just had this, yeah. So it was really like 2 months of like deep, really deeply meeting myself, and then like 4 months of like complete ecstasy of like, and just of this like power of just, I felt like I could create anything, like anything I wanted. I was just like a little bit more of that, a little bit more of that, and just and just like and deeply showing myself to the world, like letting the world really see me and see my full like um, yeah.
That's beautiful. And I'm curious. No, I was gonna ask like your age. You don't have to say, just because I was thinking that is appropriate to the age, like in the archetypes that I think are so important to bring forth as well, because there's so much, I mean, there's taboo everywhere when we talk about the feminine, and age is one of them. So when you were talking, I was saying I was showing myself, and I was just like, that's so beautiful and powerful, especially to some part of our, I mean, we can show ourselves in whatever part of our lives, but I think that there is shame in that for a lot of women that are actually in the blossoming phase, that is the flowering phase, that actually the flower needs to be seen and shown, and it's beautiful. But I was curious about, for example, but actually, I mean, there were different things that came to me as I was hearing you. One thing, and I was curious, I mean, it's just a hypothesis, might be completely mistaken, but I was thinking, as I was hearing you, and you said, oh, it's like the world was black and white and it went to color. What came to me is that, and I heard you talking before about developmental stages, and I'm involved in developmental stages too. I studied deeply the stages model, and but I also really like Gebsa. That, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but one of the ways that he talks about is that he doesn't bring the stages as hierarchical. He talks about structures of development more as if they're all coexisting, and you kind of go into the rooms of yourself in different moments, for example. And the image that came to me is that the magic structure of development, that which to me is where color is. If you know, maybe color is everywhere, but the way I picture a very colorful world is in the magic structure, which is the images that I have is like tribal women and the pagan times. And so I was just, that's what it came to me, is that maybe you're awakening that element that was a bit dormant, because culture, I mean, culture doesn't need that element, inverted commas, you know, just suspends us in the mental, in the depleted mental, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, you know, there's this beauty. And it's sometimes when I'm sharing with people, it's the difference. I talk about the difference between knowing that a tree is, using the name tree, and actually just being with the tree and the aliveness, and that, and I don't know if that's a little bit of what it felt like for you, or
Yeah. 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 Again, it's a bit difficult to like on it the closer I get to that that about the glitter frequency, like that it's a different frequency or something of being in the
Mhm,
world.
mhm,
um and it's so fascinating because even like I've been practicing this for 6 years now, and I fall in and out all the all the time. um and it's like when I'm not in it, it's so far away, like I can't even imagine what it feels like.
mm,
And then when I am in it, it's like it feels so obviously true, or like so in Swedish we have a word called självklart, like it's just so there, like
mhm,
it's unquestionable, like of course this is the truth of like of course this is um uh
mm,
yeah. And yeah, and it's really interesting, like it really can't be explained, like, and this is, yeah, it just really needs to be felt. And
mm,
um and I, I think this is the, why, like the difficulty and kind of the moment 22 in this work is that like we're so stuck, like in the mental, and we want to understand everything until we can kind of go into it.
mhm,
um, but you can't explain it. Like you just need to have like be blessed like I was to like meet other women who have like found there. And then it's like when you step into the relationship with those women, it's like I can
mm,
often feel it like is that I've been in the desert in like
mm,
all my life, and then somebody gives me a glass of water and I'm like wow, okay, like this is what water tastes like.
mm.
um uh, yeah.
And then,
And
and for example, in your when you're talking to when you say you dip in and out, is there a
mm,
gateway for you now to step in, and a gate, or some things that happen in your life that take you out, or is it just unpredictable? How does it work for you now?
oh, this is interesting. Me and Louisa, we were talking about this the other day, that it's like there's definitely gateways in. um and like I could speak to some. So Lovisa talks about like embodied presence, embodied pleasure, and embodied power.
Mhm,
um so like um gateways are like really being with your body, like being with your body, um slowing down, relaxing, creating space, um uh, this really really embodied presence. And that is really not this kind of what I see as more maybe a masculine practice of like mindfulness, of like
mhm,
clearing your mind and like I think Sarah Beek talks about like the masculine presence is like being on the top of a mountain and everything's super clear and still, and the feminine presence is like being in the jungle, like it's so rich and so dense. Like Lovisa does this honey meditation practice where it's about filling up your body with this golden honey like substance that's
mm,
like
mm,
it's this rich embodied presence, but that
mm,
is not still not trying going anywhere.
mhm,
It's an allowing of what exactly what is. So like deep truth, um deep allowing, deep acceptance, um um and then like the kind of activating practices, but not but or inviting maybe is a better than activating,
mhm,
but like to there, we do like jewel breathing, like we breathe up the energy from our jewels,
mhm,
or like shaking or screaming or
mhm,
um but always like in this flow of like what the invitation for the body, but and then like a deep practice of being in your longing is like a really really core practice,
mhm,
and really understanding this, like this difference of like um not allowing yourself to long, kind of more maybe this more masculine like detachment, which is like an important practice, but just to like to understand the difference, but that is actually this like of really being in the world but not of the world, so like really saying yes to life and saying yes to your longings, and this thing of like being in your longing is so opening for women. Like this is a practice, like a daily practice I have, like what am I really longing for, like what is my jewel longing for. And then also like you even you can also go to like what turns me on right now, what makes me come alive, what is like depending on so it's like the jewel, the stomach, the power of the stomach and the heart, like so there's all these different practices. And like I was talking to Louisa, but like the more I know of these practices, the more my super ego also knows these practices, and it's just this thing of like not trying to perform them, or not grasping this state of like, oh, I want to be more this, or I want to, but just like deeply allowing. And it's really difficult practice for myself, I find. But yeah, maybe the last thing to say is, for me, it's like surrounding myself with other women. It's like the number one path, gateway in, of like surrounding myself with other women who are in this frequency. Like a woman saying yes to herself is the best way for me to get in contact with saying yes to myself. Like saying yes to her full self.
No, I love that. And different things came to me while you're saying again, and I'm curious. So that's where, and I'm also curious about some of the frames. I know that you have some frames that you've presented in some conversations that I've watched in preparation for this, and so ask in a moment. But the first thing that came to me as I was hearing you was, I wonder, because you're from Sweden originally, and I'm from Brazil originally. I live in Australia, so I live in a third country. But I was just curious if the bits that we have ostracized of ourselves, I think there's some bits in the overall female in modernity. I think there's truth to that for sure. But I'm also curious if the light and the shadow from let's say Swedish culture is different than the light and the shadow from Brazilian culture and the Australian culture, because I see in Brazil, for example, I'd say that even though it's a bit more depleted, I wouldn't say it's the very open sensuality from I think there's a different place of integration that happens in maturity, in practice, for sure. But there is an element of the beauty of the feminine that Brazil celebrates, and also that's Brazil's problem. It is both its Achilles heel and it's light, because I can see how, some people might be familiar with the archetype of Aphrodite, or the goddess of beauty, and I was just running a retreat, and so we played with both men and women in the retreat, and we played with some archetypes, and we offered the Aphrodite archetype to a woman, and towards the end, I mean, it didn't connect with her to start with. She wasn't, it wasn't her natural archetype. Towards the end, I could see coming alive in her. So I know what it is to see coming alive from the inside. And simultaneously, there's also the shadow side of that archetype as well, when it's not grounded in it's I suppose what its purpose, or I don't even know if purpose is the right word. It's almost like if it's disconnected from its maybe if it's disconnected from the whole, I don't know if that makes any sense. It's disconnected from the whole, then it can be separating of other women, and you know, it can be ostracizing in a different way. So I'd love to hear you. And
yeah, this is actually something I've just been thinking about like last week, so it's quite new. So I'm like playing with it. I'm not speaking it as like a truth. It's something I'm playing with. But that like so much seems to come back to that, like the masculine split, that like, you know, like in intellectual deep web they talk about like how feminine is mythos and masculine is split between logos and pathos, and how like as soon as you put that masculine lens that things are in polarity or things are split or things are like, then the feminine becomes very distorted. And it's like, and I see that so much also like in women doing women's work, that women talk about the feminine as split as well. So that like, and when we have our, when we internalize this kind of split, then it's, you know, it's like, then we think we can like use our sexuality to for something, but like, you know, like it's like, you know, like this split, like the Madonna and the whore, or like the different, but like actually if you look at like the feminine archetypes, always like here's 12 different archetypes to describe this flavor, you know, like it's not like there's this and there's this, you know, like because the feminine is so like cyclical and like so I think it's like when the feminine is not in, hasn't, you know, is not in touch with her, with true femininity of like, when it becomes this like split, I think it becomes distorted. And also when we lose ourselves, like when we're outer directed, when we're doing it, you know, to please men basically, I guess, you know, or like to please the masculine, you know, to please the outer, to please, or to please the group, or to please, or, you know, then it's and I mean, I to me it's completely different, like this this kind of jewel force that I call it, like this, like she has 1,000% integrity. I can like never like, hey, like I want a little bit more of this. It would nice to be have, you know, like, or like, oh, I'm really attracted by this person. Now I want to like, she's like, I'm out. Like, what are you doing? You know, like it's, and actually, I've been very scared of my power, like all my life, just because of this thing, because I'm like, how do I know that I'm not being manipulative? How do I know? Because like I have a lot of like life force and power in me. And since I got in touch with this practice and like this, like had a more full experience of what this is, then I have 100% trust that like this is only here to create life. Like there's not a fiber in my body that has any mistrust of like, which is what has allowed me to show myself, because because I guess I had this kind of I don't know if I'm making any sense, but
no,
there's
I appreciate it when you said about, because of course I was appreciating when you said the split, the distinctions, of course, that the Madonna is not only that side of, you know, the archetype is not only that. And I loved a while ago somebody was introducing Kali to me in a different way, which I really appreciated. He was saying, it was actually a man, but he was saying Kali is the most loving of all the goddesses. She loves so much that she'll chop your head off if she needs to wake you up. So it's this intense love that is fierce. And so I love these yeah, it's not as binary as one would have think, you know, just Kali is just that, and you know, whatever the energies are. Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. I was still feeling into the culture, because when I go to Sweden, I've been there a few times, and I go like, oh my God, we need a homeopathy of Sweden in Brazil, you know, because it's a completely different felt experience. Like when I go there, it's So I also was wondering if okay, so what's coming up for me is that I wonder, because Swedish people, and I'm assuming women, have developed, and I say that because of the society. When I look at Sweden as a society, it seems to me that Sweden resides more in the mental than, I'd say, Brazil. Brazil, I'd say, is much more in the passion, in the desire, and then it kind of rationalizes with poor reasoning. Like it's like, oh, I'm just gonna sleep with my neighbor's wife, but it's okay, whatever. I'm simplifying, it's not entirely true, but so I'm saying that just because I wonder, I'm wondering if these practices that you're talking about, they feel really safe if you have the mental really, really developed as a woman. Then I think it's I could see it being like a very beautiful integration. But I'm wondering if you haven't focused on that before, and I'm not even suggesting that it's true over the country, but I'm just saying as the overall practice for all the women, I wonder if you don't have the mental developed properly, then you might end up brushing off the mental and getting yourself into trouble because the energy is, it's fire, right? Playing with fire.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point. And I think I emphasize so much on the body because, as you say, I put a lot of work on the mental before, before these 6 years. And I mean, this is true to most women who are attracted to Lovisa's courses. And this is what I have such deep respect for Lovisa, because she is so integrated. Like she is her mind is so deeply wise, and the practice that she comes from, like her lineage, is so integrated in, like it's not a pushing away of the mind. And again, like that's also the split, like it's not that women, like if they're sexual, they're just their bodies and they're just their passion. Like it is so for men, like logos pathos, like it's much more of a split for men. But for women, that's not the natural state. Like actually, when I'm the most sexually alive, like when I'm like, that's when I'm the most wise. Like these insights that I have, that I write about in my articles, come from this deep integration of like this sexual and my heart and my mind. Like it's not and they're not split, so to speak. So like but I that's why, like, there's so many beautiful practices around awakening the feminine. And so but I often feel that I say again that, like, that we're split even there. Like, either it's just like love and integration and like holding, or it's like the I shouldn't name names, but it's like, like the hardcore tantra, like, oh, activate your sexual energy, like. And it's just like, that's not how the female body works. Like, and and bringing it like back to the the cultures. I think that like, I think that the practice, works for all women. Or, the practice, I mean, of course the feminine works for all women, or not that all women are feminine, but like it works for all feminine women, because it's not about learning anything, it's about coming home to who you are. So of course the feminine is feminine, if that makes sense. And um and as you say, like, depending on what parts, how the masculine split has shown up in your culture and in your personal journey, you're gonna need kind of different different support or guidance, or to find home to yourself. So I think, it's like in Sweden, I think it's easier. I think it's easier for women to it's like, because for a lot of, women in Sweden, we've just been like completely disconnected from our sexuality. So it's not like we haven't been using our sexuality, to impress men or these kind of things. So we don't have to untrain that. We can just go straight into, okay, actually just starting to be more sexual and sensual, which is which is maybe, in one way beneficial, but also it's really like there's a huge aversion towards female sexuality in Sweden. That's like the
so like you'd say in Sweden, because there is a beauty and an elegance that I see, but it is when you mention androgynous, I would have experienced more Swedish and some European friends as having more of that energy than Latin friends and colleagues. So that would make sense that side has been it's even like my perception was even that wasn't cool. Like it was like not, yeah, it was something that was in I don't know, there was, which I also understand when it was that not, I was gonna say it seemed to me that I'm just thinking of a few particular people, even like really smart younger people. When I meet like young Swedish people, I'm like, oh my goodness, they're like so clever beyond their ages. But I'm also coming from a Latin perspective, so I'm looking for what we don't foreground maybe in my culture, and maybe there is something that if a Swede went to Brazil would go, oh, they have some bits, switched on that I just don't notice as much because it's part of my culture.
Yeah. I think like I feel so privileged to have grown up in Sweden and to be a woman in Sweden, because I think like so basically, if I'm like oversimplifying a million times this very, very complicated societal, it's, one way of looking at it is that like the equality and feminist movement in Sweden has kind of been like, we can also be men. And in Brazil you haven't had that. It's, you're just you get to be women, but you also now oversimplifying and not like lack, a lot of the power and possibilities and opportunities that the Swedish culture then has allowed women to step into, because we've adopted and like, gone a lot into the masculine. And I would never, want to give up those rights and those privilege. Like I feel like I really feel feel it in my heart, like a deep, deep gratitude for the life that I can live and the woman that I can be. And it feels such a privilege to, on top of that, be one of the women who like has all of that, and I'm allowed to then, come home again to the feminine with that, like not losing that, because it's like, globally the feminine is not appreciated and is not respected and is not understood. It's like the hero's journey with Joseph Campbell. There's one that has done the heroine's journey. I don't know what her name is, or I don't even know if it's a woman, but anyways, there's a heroine's journey. And basically, in short, the heroine's journey is that like the feminine loses contact with the heroine's journey starts that the feminine loses contact with the feminine and goes out and does the hero's journey. And then when she has done the hero's journey, she realizes that, was this it? Like I've slayed the dragon, I've got all the money and all the things and but like it feels just so empty. Like, is this? And then she reintegrates the feminine, and then she becomes integrated between both the masculine and the feminine. And this is exactly the journey that like almost all women who are taking Louise's courses, like they're super successful women who are like, who have succeeded in the masculine, and then are like, was this it? Like I'm here, like this feels so empty. But I don't believe it has to be that way. Like, I think the heroine's journey should not be disconnect with the feminine, go do the masculine thing, and then you can reintegrate. Like, I really believe that we could build a world where like you start with, yeah, with fully embodying the feminine, and then meet the masculine from there, and then integrate. Like, you don't have to, and like I don't know what that would look like, because our society is so deeply steeped in the masculine. But I guess, yeah, I guess what I'm like, yeah, trying to say is that I'm deeply grateful for the Swedish society, and I'm wondering, like, if there's a way for in Brazil to like still get that respect and power and equal rights without having to let go of being a woman.
It's a tricky thing, because I'm also oversimplifying. Maybe another time we can have larger conversations on this, because of course, the majority of my Brazilian friends are thriving. They're quite successful in male-dominated environments, because I graduated as a journalist back in the day, and a lot of my friends that are high up in journalism, you're with, you're a director of something. The way of operating is what's required of you to work in the corporate, to work in any place that you start at a certain time of the day, end at a certain time of the day, 5 days a week. It's a construct that serves, I mean, I don't think it serves anybody, but it certainly doesn't serve the female body. So I think that in Brazil we are there, but I think what Sweden has that Brazil doesn't have is the rights, the support, the support that you get from the government in some ways, what parents get, what fathers and mothers get. It's just, I think it puts women in a place that you can have a relaxed nervous system, so you can start seeing things. Whereas in Brazil, you still have an activated nervous system, because you have no support from the government, and you have to work your ass off. And then if you have COVID or anything, the government doesn't support you in any way. So then you're still in fight and flight, and you can't really, like Bud and other people are saying, like, you need the protection of the tribe. I don't know if it's him or somebody was saying that, and I think that it makes total sense. But one thing, because I was just feeling into our what you reinforce in your work and what I reinforce in my work, and of course I'd say that both of us don't think that it's only that, but I noticed that I spend more time saying it's that, because I noticed that in my culture and in my and also in modernity at large. But I think that the menstrual cycle part of things, it's not like sensuality and sexuality. I can see how at least people would be interested in hearing, even if they would put that in the box of, they would see it in a wrong way. And then maybe you have the time, because you have the curiosity of people to go like, no, I'll tell you what it actually is. Whereas the menstrual cycle, a lot of the times you have a closed door, like you don't have curiosity. A lot of people don't have any curiosity. And I'm like, well, that's a big problem. I mean, that's a big problem in the concrete, just in the concrete level. If women are still thinking that that part of themselves is wrong, then certainly they're not going to relax to notice all the other bits. So to me, where I come from, and I totally am with you, that this aliveness of the feminine, this this, some people call it Shakti, but it's just this connection with life, interaction with life itself. To me, it woke up through the awareness of the menstrual cycle, because through flowing with my cycle, through just going like, okay, I'm on the estrogen part, so I'm really adaptable and doing whatever. And then, oh, I'm, this is going on, and I'm actually making peace with all of me. So all of the archetypes that I inhabit in different ways throughout my cycle, especially the frowned upon ones. And then eventually learning to harness them, because in the beginning, like any new skill, it's a bit clumsy. Start lashing out at people like, oh, it's okay, but then slowly going and develop and really becoming I suppose this dance itself is sensual because it's a flow the whole way through. It's flowing. So, but I think that my entry point is really going. If the kids, so I have a 12-year-old girl, for example, and I'm like, if she starts her cycle, knowing that's a beautiful part of her expression in the world, and that all of her is perfect and all her friends feel that, and then the world mirrors that back at you with systems that in which you can participate in that way. You don't have to pretend you don't have a cycle to participate in the workforce. I think that in that way, in my mind, I'm like, women will feel freer in their life force naturally as children, and then they will, hopefully, that's at least the story I tell myself. That's like, I'd like to picture a world in which yeah, they, because like you, I think when I see my kids playing, that life force is in them. When I see, sometimes they go to a Steiner school, and I see the young girls that are coming into puberty, and their beauty is just there, not just physical beauty, but the way they move, and they're moving, and they're putting the candles out, and I see the boys, they don't know what to do with themselves. They're just like watching, and they're like, they're still not quite there yet in puberty, and I just go like, wow, it's fascinating to me how the world actually put a lid on that, because it's such powerful force. I can see what it moves. And I noticed that in puberty, when the girls get their periods, a few years in, they kind of lose that. They kind of lose that glow. So keeping that innocence alive, and I suppose it is one of the ways that I think we can I don't know, keep that Shakti, alive. And yeah, yeah, I'll just stop and see if there's anything alive for you. I think, Fanny, did you break off? Hello?
Yes, I'm back.
You're
Sorry.
back? Oh, you're back?
Yeah, sorry. The last thing I heard was keeping the innocence alive.
Oh, that's okay. That's a good. I was just curious if there was anything for you that you wanted to share from that, or anything that came up for you.
Yeah, yeah, I love that word innocence. I think that's also like one of the beautiful, beautiful things about Lovisa's practice, that it's like it's deeply, deeply innocent, which I think again is, reclaiming, I was talking about like Seductress Club, like reclaiming what is seduction and what is female sexuality. And deeply innocent in the way that it doesn't want anything, or it's not going anywhere, which is a bit paradoxical because you attach it through your longings, but the more you start flowing into it, you realize it's following what is emerging. So there's like a deep innocence in that. And I mean, yeah, I think like you said that uh, it's different kind of entryways into the same thing, and I feel we're kind of describing the same thing, and maybe it is different culturally what different women we need. And I always say that, like, I do not think there's going to be like one global path for the global feminine awakening, like, because the feminine is so multifaceted, like, and it's just every woman needs to find needs to find her way in, and it's like it really doesn't matter what that way is. It's just like what makes you come home and come alive and come and like come home to your truth. And but one perspective that does come up is like I like that the menstrual cycle, it like it helps you to understand the process, like it helps you to understand like the flow. But I think that since women are so disconnected from their power, like I knew a bit about the menstrual cycle. I definitely know a lot more now, but I still knew and to me it didn't really help me because or it did help a lot, but it's like without deep connection to your body and your sexuality, it's so difficult to be in this world as a woman. Because like even if like because like what this does, like because it's that part of the, it's, like during your ovulation, like if you don't, if there's too much shame and there's too much things holding that life force energy back, and like then like when you go down into the cycle, you don't have you don't have the inner support needed to be able to go down. And that's what I was saying about my journey. Like when I got access to this life force energy, I was able to go to the deep, to my darkness. And if you're not freed in your ovulation, then when you come to to your winter, like it's really hard to be in winter. And it's so it's like, this is the thing again, like the feminine is cyclical, but we can't be in winter if we haven't been in summer, and we can't be in summer if we haven't been in winter. And we're not allowed to be fully, like the only feminine, like, and maybe this is in Sweden, I don't know, but I still have feeling like culturally it's so much more okay to talk about being like soft, receiving, nurturing, mothering, like that feminine is like, it's still okay because it's like it's not, it's disempowered. Whereas like, like the masculine isn't scared of a collapsed feminine crying. Like they might think they're annoying, but like the masculine is scared of Kali that just like chops the head off with all the love, like it's yeah. And I don't really think I'm like contradicting what you're saying, but
No,
but I experienced that a lot of like work with women haven't started with helping women access that, like, and it's not about being like horny and wanting to have sex. It's about like filling yourself up with yourself, like with your like and if we don't have that, I think we're so screwed in the world, like because the world is so masculine, like so yeah. So then even if you tell a woman like this is how your menstruation cycle works, it's like, well, I'm still just fucking overwhelmed and like I can't be here, like um
no, that
yeah,
makes
something.
that I think there is, and it's interesting because it's, of course, I'm hearing you and I'm thinking, oh, there are bits that will come later. Like I can see some bits that they're not quite ready for now. Like the next conversation will have a next evolution of this. I think it's really rich. I relate to what you're saying, but simultaneously, I also relate to, so for example, in Brazil, women are much more okay with the sensuality. So women with like cleavage and show, and it can be the distorted version, but there is a play. The culture plays with sensual energy. So carnival and like if you I have friends that have gone to Brazil and they say, oh my God, it's pure Shakti. So there is that in the water we drink there. So I think in some way, maybe I'm speaking to what, of course, you're always wanting the homeopathy to what you need or to what you. I think in Brazil, what I experienced, and in some other cultures, let's say America with Hollywood movies, and it was the archetypes of the follicular phase of the cycle, which is because the teaching of the cycle, it's not really just telling people what it is. It's embedded in the expression, right? So I'd say that the expression of Brazil is the follicular phase of the cycle. So it's very sensual, it's very outward, it has a lot of that. But then the down part of the cycle is the part that people just roll their eyes and go like, oh, there she goes. or that's not relevant. And I'm going, no, 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 no. That's actually really, really relevant. And I think it's not just Brazil. I think that we just created I suppose for many reasons. I think it's a normal thing. I was just thinking it's a normal thing of humans when somebody hasn't quite integrated something, the energy of the cycle is obviously unintegrated in women because we haven't been able to use it intelligently. So when we come, if we are constantly adapting to what the world needs, like you said, it's so hard to be a woman in this world. It's so fucking hard. So then PMS time comes, and I'm using the term so people understand. I don't like using that term. Women either try to suppress that or they lash out. And when they lash out, people don't hear that as there is signal in that, but that's not heard. So I think that part of the way where I come in the teaching is like, pay attention to the signal in your lashing out, because if you actually, so I can see you coming from in the ovulation, which I'm like, dude, yeah, totally. And there's a lot of truth in that. If you let that flower, you might still not completely own the dark side. You were saying that you do, and a lot of women do, and I think that's amazing. But it's still very scary for some cultures, and I'd say that maybe Brazilian culture is a very sunny culture. So it's a culture of sun and happiness, and not the dark. So maybe Sweden and the European cultures that have more of I don't know, it's like a friendliness to the dark of human, the philosophers and all of that. Brazil is much more upbeat culture. So the upbeat culture, and it's not just Brazil, it's the modernity, but a lot of America. And so I think I enter in the acupuncture point that I think is what some bits of the culture has totally ostracized. And the phase of life that I see that suffering the most in my culture is postmenopausal women, because postmenopausal women in a culture that only values beauty and sensuality and up to the ovulation phase of a woman's life, then you get to the other phases of incredible wisdom and intelligence, and then you're nobody, right? So you lose your power. So, but I think that Europe does that better than Brazil. I can see European women much more, and tell me if I'm mistaken. I see European women having much more, the culture found ways to appreciate other elements of the women that might not be the sensual part that you speak of, that I think it's very, very important, especially also in postmenopausal women. It's all the time there. It's all the time there. But I think that my culture thinks so much of that part that I'm going, no, let's focus on this other.
Yeah, and I know when I think that that's natural, and again that it's like that like even if we're even if we're being perceived by the outer to focus on different parts, to like to that to not receive that split projection. So like like I'm not speaking about the ovulation phase, because again, like the summer can't come without the winter, and the winter can't come without the summer. And like to me, like what is a sexy woman? Like to me, a woman like deep in her winter, in her deep truth, just like screaming or crying or sobbing, that's a sexy woman, like it's and again, it's seductress club, like people might have ideas what that is, but like what that, and it's reclaiming our truth about ourselves, that like yeah, so I think that of like, but of course when you choose words, when you call something seductress club, or it's gonna project things and it's gonna create an entry point, because because everybody starts, or most women have that split don't have the understanding for what it means to be a woman, because there's very few teachers, and all teachers, you know, are going to start somewhere, and as you say, culturally that's going to be perceived, you know, as different things. And there is a truth that yeah, as we talked about, that like, you know, different, depending on what culture you're coming from, you need different different aspects. Yeah.
I'm curious also because there is something that you said that feels really true to me in my own experience, but also I'm in my mid-40s, so it's different because it's a maturation of sensuality that is for me, and that it doesn't even, that is, and it doesn't even, I wouldn't even say, I sometimes I don't use the words sensuality or sexuality exactly because I know where people are going to go with it, and it's not interesting to me because I'm like, I'm going to lose credibility and I don't want to lose you. But it's mostly because I'm from Brazil and I want to divert from that way of saying. But I was gonna hold on, my thought was escaped me for a moment. It was about oh it was, I remember. It was, it's like when you're talking about you write from your body, right? Now you have the experience of writing from your body, or that to me is sensuality. That to me is what I mean by it is, like, for example, when people say to me, you know, how are you going to prepare for this retreat or this? I say, I'm going to prepare for my podcast on a bike ride. I'm going to swim in the river. That's how I don't sit in my computer and I think about things. I'm in relationship to life, and but that came to me with age, I mean, not just age, awakening to that, but also just developing a different relationship to men, to starting to have this dance in a different way. And I'm curious about because for younger women, like the physiology and the maturity, I imagine it's much more entangled. So for example, for me, I'm not wanting to have more babies, so in my physiology that's not happening anymore, but so I can play with sensuality in a completely different way. So I'm wondering, because I can see how in Brazil the sensuality, like you say, it's very attached. It's beautiful, but it's also has its shadows because it's very connected to wanting to impress the opposite sex. Whereas what you were talking about, it doesn't seem to be this way. It seems very different. But I'm curious how it manifests in a young woman's life that is still looking for a partner, for example, or still looking for yeah, like this expression that's not necessarily wanting to be anything for another. Or is that distinction even possible, or is it just the expression?
Yes, I think it's super possible and super relevant. And I think that like this is the thing. Like I think a lot of that thing that like young women are sexy and older women aren't, you know, like that's also the masculine projection. Like I don't think that the main this might be like a bit edgy to say, but I really don't think that the main reason for female sexuality is for reproduction. Like I really don't. I think the main reason for female sexuality is like the fuel of life that is not, you know, connected to just a baby, you know, like it's connected to everything. It's connected to nature, to like, and that doesn't stop when you can't have babies anymore. Like and of course there is that flow, you know, in the body, of course, that, you know, and there's hormones and there's all these different things, but like there's just this deep yeah, it's just a deep connection to life force. And when I say life force, you know, you might think that looks like you're like, oh, like, oh, you know, but it can also be, you know, cutting heads off or really feeling the deep pain and sorrow of the world. That's also life force, you know, like, and it's so what is so amazing, you know, like we do these things where like where we gather women who are like on awakening feminine leadership, and then we gather men to like witness us when we're dancing. And I remember like a young woman sharing like, this is the first time I danced for myself in front of men. And like, and the thing is, the men think that's the most sexy thing they've ever seen when we're not dancing for them. Because I had this, we did this yeah, it doesn't matter, but also like I'm an engineer, so it's a bit nerdy, but a way of thinking of it is like, you know, if you think of that, like the feminine sexuality is like the pressure in a balloon. And the masculine is like a vacuum container that you like put around the balloon. So in that vacuum, the balloon is allowed to expand. And then women think that it's the men that are making them bigger, but it's their own life force and pressure that is making them bigger. The men are just creating a good container for them to be seen and to be able to expand. But then women lose that and think it's the men. So they start trying to like, okay, how can I be in this container so that the man will expand me more? And then the man is like, what happened with the life force? Like, where is it? And then men start resenting. Like, it's so messed up and so backwards. Where like women really just have to really come, like, regardless if it's, you know, daring to go into your winter or your summer, like it's about like doing it for yourself, only for yourself, which is this paradoxical thing that like when women only do things for themselves, that's when they're in tune with what, you know, what the world needs, or what is, you know, like this quote of like, don't do what the world needs, do what makes you most come alive, because what the world needs is more alive people. Like, I think that's so true for feminine leadership. It's about truth. like Truth is what is sensual, you know. Like embodied truth is and I think this, you know, this is the difference, regardless, like if in Brazil you're like being sexual for someone else, or in Sweden you're shut off from your sexuality, like both are not, none of those are the feminine, because they're
Oh,
still outer directed.
I agree. No, I agree. I love that. I was just gonna say, because I always keep imagining people listening to this and going like, "Oh, that's not exactly right in Brazil," and I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah,
So I'll just caveat. I'll just caveat that I actually do think that there is also that element of women being sexy for themselves. Like if you see the funk, there is a funk movement in the slums, and the women, they're like just like woo, and they, you know, they have big butts and they like it, and they, you know, there is an element which I think it's actually tapping into a little bit of that energy that you were talking about, that is dormant in some places. I don't think it's, you know, it's integrated or whatever. I think there's a little bit more confusion in that way, but I think it does tap. And I totally no, I totally hear you. I remember reading a book maybe a long time ago, maybe more than 10 years ago, and it was an awakening book, so it's a spiritual book, but written by a woman. She didn't, you know, she's not a famous spiritual teacher or anything, but she wrote saying life as life as sex or something like that. So just how the, you know, the breeze of a palm tree brushing in your cheek is so sensual. And I experienced that. That's my lived experience. I understand, but I was just like, wow, man, that's not gonna, like, I don't, it's a hard thing because most people, I love the balloon, I love your nerdy. I didn't think it was nerdy. I love the balloon because that feels really true. That I think I just don't use the name. I think we're actually speaking more of the same than, it's almost like I'm using different words for the fear of collapsing into something that I know that my country has shadow in. But I actually think you're right, that life force energy of when you see somebody just alive, just happy to be them in whatever way, and that's um you know, that's the transmission they give. And of course I think that a world with more of that would be a completely different world. And women, I agree with you. I think that women, the bodies of women, for many reasons that we won't have time to go in today, I think have lost that glow. And I think it's tremendous work to awaken that glow in women's life. I mean, for sure, I think the transformation that you experienced is and you have said that other women have experienced that, is for sure. I can see that. I can see, and I've been part of groups in which I've seen the awakening of that, and it's just beautiful to. I remember being in a course that I wasn't running. I was participating in, and we after the course, we all went to the sauna together. In Australia, we don't have the culture of going naked into the sauna, but we did. So it was just women, and we did. And I remember, and it was a sauna that had a fire in the middle, and it was kind of like a yurt form. And I remember looking at everybody's bodies, like all these women of all ages, like some was 75 and 85, and young women, and I remember looking and going like, oh my God, you're all so gorgeous. You're so beautiful. I love you all. And it was just, this, and they were dancing and doing their thing. So I love it.
Yeah, it reminds me, like somebody said, like why is it only beautiful women taking Louise's courses? And I was like, they're beautiful because they're taking Louise's courses, like it says nothing about like anything, how their face or body or anything looks like. It's just like women in their truth, saying yes to themselves. And again, that can look like being happy or sad or angry or anything, but like being fully free of shame and free of whatever, free of just like letting whatever is come out, is the most beautiful thing in the world. Yeah.
I love that. And I think it's a beautiful place for us to close, because I think it's almost a coalescing of our work in the world. And when you said, like, and the beautiful thing can be without shame. Without shame. Everything, your whole cycle is perfect. Your whole thing is perfect. And then from that place, we can dance so much more beautifully with men and create. And yeah. This was fun. I enjoyed. Thank you for coming to play with me in this conversation.